Ever get that feeling? Like you just open a dating app, just a quick peek, next thing you know, like an hour's gone. Swiping, scrolling, and you're just sucked in.
Oh,
It's
totally.
like a vortex. And the stuff you sent us about dating apps, it really got us thinking, like really diving deep into this whole thing of why we get so hooked.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, you've got like multiple angles here, right? So we've got Janelle Testa, and she's sharing her personal story, like her own experience in Newsweek. And it's pretty intense. She's talking about dating app addiction. And then there's Jordan Peterson, and he's got this YouTube commentary, and he's kind of breaking down like the mechanics of these apps and the effects they can have. And then on top of that, we've got all this information about a lawsuit against Match Group, which, that brings in the whole business model behind these things.
It's like the whole picture. So in this deep dive, what we really want to do is figure out why. Why do we get pulled in? Like, what's the psychology behind it all? What are the different ways of looking at how these apps affect us? And at the end of the day, we want you, the listener, to walk away with a clearer understanding of what's going on when you use them.
Right, like knowledge is power.
Yeah,
Well,
like a real informed look at this thing that's so common now, and maybe even figure out how to have a bit more control over it all.
absolutely.
So let's start with Janelle's story. It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, Testa's account in Newsweek, it's really personal.
Yeah.
And she describes this, well, it's almost like a pattern. You meet someone, there's a spark, maybe a little connection, then boom, rejection.
Yeah.
And what does she do? Right back to the apps. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, doesn't matter. She's back on trying to, I guess, deal with that letdown.
Like a cycle almost.
Definitely a cycle.
And she talks about this panic energy, right? This feeling that like her happiness, her whole mood was somehow connected to finding a match. Like she was on 5 different apps.
Right.
5. And it wasn't just casual, like a little here and there. It was constant. This pressure to be always searching, swiping, like she'd miss out on something huge if she stopped.
I can see how that would be exhausting.
Totally draining. And then she gets into the actual dating part, and she's honest about it. This feeling that she had to go on dates all the time, several times a week, even with people she wasn't that into. Just this, like, need to keep going, keep the numbers up, because she was so afraid of being alone.
It sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it does. And then comes this realization she has, and it's pretty profound, I think. She compares her relationship with these apps to her past struggles with addiction, like substance abuse.
It's a powerful comparison for sure. And it actually ties into something of the information you gave us. It's about how these apps can trigger the dopamine reward system in our brains.
Ah, the dopamine hit.
Yep, just like those notifications on social media, or even like the anticipation of winning when you're gambling. These apps can trigger that dopamine release.
Okay, so for those who haven't heard this before, what exactly is dopamine doing here?
Well, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's like a chemical messenger in your brain. And it plays a big role in how we experience pleasure, reward, that good feeling. But it's not just about the feeling itself. It's also about what drives us to seek out those pleasurable experiences in the first place.
Oh, I see.
So, the anticipation of a match, seeing that little notification pop up, the possibility of connecting with someone, all those things can trigger dopamine. And then you get this reinforcing cycle. You get the dopamine, you feel good, you want more, so you keep coming back for more.
So it's like the hope of that connection, that little spark of possibility, keeps us engaged, even if, the actual conversations or dates don't always live up to it.
Exactly. And this brings us to something interesting. Both Janelle's article and the information about the lawsuit touch on the design of these apps, like how they're built.
Structure, the mechanics.
Yeah. So this lawsuit against Match Group, it's making some pretty serious accusations. They're saying that the business model is predatory. Like, the apps are designed to keep us using them, even if it's not actually good for us.
And Jordan Peterson, in his YouTube commentary, he talks about something similar, this thing called seeding.
Right. So he explains how some apps might actually create fake profiles, often using like really attractive people, and they use these profiles to give new users, especially men, a bunch of matches right away.
Like a little taste to get them hooked.
Exactly. Peterson uses this pretty strong analogy. He compares it to chasing the dragon with drugs. Getting that initial high and then always chasing that feeling, even though you rarely get it back.
And he actually says he heard about this tactic directly from someone who worked at a dating app, though he doesn't name the app.
Yeah, he's concerned that if one app is doing it, others are probably doing it too. It's all about competition, getting users and keeping them.
It makes you think about the real goal, doesn't it? Is it about connecting people, or is it about keeping them swiping?
Right. It's a good question.
Then Peterson goes into some really interesting data about how men and women behave differently on these apps.
Yeah, he brings up this statistic about how women only like about 4% of male profiles on Tinder, but men like over 60% of female profiles. That's a huge difference.
A huge difference. And he uses that to explain this concept called hypergamy.
Right.
So for anyone who's not familiar with that, could you break down what hypergamy means in this context?
Okay, so in like evolutionary biology and social sciences, hypergamy usually refers to the tendency to look for partners who are of equal or higher status. So, social standing or economic status.
Mm.
Peterson's take is that women are more likely to look for partners who are up in the hierarchy, while men are more open to partners who are down. He says that across many cultures, women tend to be attracted to men who are a few years older and who show signs of success, competence, generosity, intelligence, that kind of thing.
So like qualities that might indicate stability and security.
Exactly.
And what are some of the theories about why this happens?
Well, Peterson suggests that it might be rooted in biology and the different roles men and women have historically had in reproduction. Think about it. Pregnancy, childbirth, raising kids, that's a huge investment for women. So historically, it made sense for them to seek out partners who could provide resources and safety, for themselves and their children.
Makes sense.
It's about mitigating risk.
Yeah.
He even points out that in modern society, women who become single mothers or go through divorce are more likely to experience financial hardship.
So essentially, this selectivity that Peterson links to hypergamy creates a very different playing field for men and women on these apps. And that leads him to make some pretty strong statements about the technology itself.
Yeah, he calls Tinder a transformative technology, and he thinks its impact is way bigger than we realize. He's worried that it could lead to like a rise of these hyper-successful predatory males who just don't face much rejection because of this dynamic.
And the potential consequences he talks about are a little scary, especially the idea that it could lead to people learning psychopathic behaviors.
His logic is that if a small group of men are getting tons of positive attention and almost no rejection, they might start focusing only on short-term gratification,
Hmm.
like getting what they want without thinking about the other person's feelings or building any real intimacy. He says it's like a breeding ground for those kinds of traits.
He even mentions a friend who had like over 20,000 matches.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it just highlights that imbalance he's talking about. And then he goes even further and says that this could be changing the whole idea of monogamy.
Yeah, he says that Tinder and apps, like it might be pushing us towards a kind of like accidental polygamy, where a small group of very successful people have way more options and a lot of other people are left with very few.
It creates like a divide.
Exactly. And he sees that unequal distribution as a potential problem, like it could lead to social unrest.
Mm.
And on top of all that, he also talks about how these apps are making things like infidelity and ghosting more common.
Right.
Like, it's so easy to be anonymous, and there's so many options, so it's easier to cheat without the usual social consequences. And ghosting, just disappearing without a word, that becomes normal because the connections feel less real, more replaceable. And he makes a good point about how ghosting other people could actually affect your own ability to form healthy relationships in the long run. It's like a pattern of behavior that can damage your empathy.
Which brings us back to Janelle and her story. She realizes that the problem wasn't just the apps themselves, but the energy she was bringing to them.
Yeah, Testa's realization is really key. She figures out that her need to swipe constantly to get that validation from matches, it was coming from inside her, from her own issues. The advice she got from SLAA, which is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, was to focus on herself, build her self-esteem, and learn to be okay with being alone. And that was a turning point for her.
She specifically talks about having low self-esteem and not being comfortable with being alone or dealing with boredom. And those things were driving her to use the apps in an unhealthy way.
And there's actually research that backs that up. There was a study in BMC psychology that showed a link between boredom and problematic dating app use.
Really?
Yeah, they found that people who were using Tinder, mostly to avoid being bored, were more likely to develop what they called problematic use. It suggests that these apps aren't a good substitute for actually engaging with life or finding healthy ways to cope with negative feelings.
So Janelle, she made a conscious decision to start spending time by herself, set limits on how much she was swiping, and be more careful about who she went on dates with. She was taking back control.
Exactly. She realized that she needed to deal with those feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, boredom, instead of just looking for a quick fix on the apps. And her story is inspiring because it shows that you can change your relationship with this technology, even though it's designed to be addictive.
And she ends with this really thoughtful point about how ironic it is to feel alone when there are millions of people feeling the same way. And she talks about the importance of taking yourself on a date.
It's like a reminder that the connection we're really looking for might have to start with ourselves.
So we're wrapping up this deep dive. What are the main things you think our listeners should take away from all of this?
Okay, so we've talked about a lot, but I think there are some really key takeaways. First, the potential for addiction with these apps is real, and that dopamine system plays a big part. Second, the stuff that came up in the lawsuit and what Peterson said about manipulative design, those are things to think about. Third, men and women have very different experiences on these apps, partly because of this idea of hypergamy, and that can have bigger effects on society as a whole. And finally, like Janelle showed us, your own well-being, how you feel about yourself, that's a huge factor in how you use these apps and whether it becomes a problem.
This has been really eye-opening. And it makes me wonder, what about you listening right now? Knowing how these apps work and the things they tap into, what's one small change you could make, maybe in how you use them or even just how you think about them, that would help you feel more in control and more connected to yourself and to other people? And maybe, just maybe, you've been mindlessly scrolling when you didn't even mean to. That dopamine thing we talked about, that might be part of what's going on there.
It's definitely something to think about.
This is just the start of the conversation. If you want to go deeper, you could check out Janelle's article in Newsweek or just spend some time reflecting on how technology is shaping our relationships. It's a big topic,
Yeah, it really is.
and it's one worth exploring.